I'm going to begin, guys, just by saying, I mean, this film is incredibly authentic. I mean, quite strikingly so. And I was wondering about what research you did and if you met many people from within this sort of world to sort of help craft your performance.
Yeah, I actually started with Kolkata. There's a red light area called Sonagachi where the Ria who plays Preeti, we both went and we stayed with the girls and to understand their body language and their stories. The stories were really harrowing, but the fact that, they are like, even today, they're like, whatever happened. But the fact that, there's so much support. There are NGOs which are involved. We met them. Apart from that, Tabrez made sure that, we did a lot of visits in a village where it comes to farms and a lot of grooming. And there's so many things involved. So it was really lovely to meet the girls, to know their stories. A few of them were sold by their own, husband or their own boyfriend. The research, I mean, I did know nothing. I had absolutely no idea what sex trafficking was all about until this film happened. And after reading the story, I never looked at the container the same way. If you see in the movie, humans, like girls get trafficked through a container. So for me, it was like an eye-opening film. And it's really nice to do a film where, people leave the theatre and they be like, hey, I learned something out of this film.
This was a long journey, wasn't it, from the film's sort of genesis to finally reaching our screens? I was wondering, yes. I mean, obviously at times I can imagine it being quite frustrating, but do you think in some ways time can actually be quite beneficial? It allows more research into the characters, into the story and into the world.
100%. You are absolutely right. I'm so glad that I didn't make it the first time that I gathered a little bit of money and I had an investor willing to make the movie, and that's when I got the call to do Slumdog, and I'm glad I did it. And I didn't make the film because it wasn't ready at that point. It was very frustrating in terms of raising money, initially trying to get this movie made, because no one wants to make a movie about sex trafficking, that too in the Hindi language. So I was very lucky when I got my producer David Womack to sign on, and even after he did, it took 3 more years to get the money. But yeah, we're just very happy that it's out now.
Yeah, because obviously, I mean, we expect a really kind of complex character in Sonia, but I thought Rashmi as well was incredibly multi-layered as well.
Mm-hmm.
You often, I was saying before to Rashmi, you don't see that often in supporting characters to have that much complexity about them. It must have been a great role for you to get your teeth stuck into in this instance.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of a good script as well. The supporting characters they support the lead cast, and in order to support the lead cast, they need to have their own story arc beautifully drawn. And I think that was the beauty of this particular script, which, by the way, was honed and kind of, it was like workshop for 10 years almost through the director's own experiences rescuing girls. And I think a lot of the stories that inform the characters are from these true stories of these girls, various girls, an amalgamation of various stories. I think characters like Rashmi, you find in high school, hurt people hurt. Where do bullies come from? They come from a place of hurt themselves. And I think it was, for me, even more important to portray that character unapologetically because she is so complicated.
Obviously, as a producer, you'll know this better than anyone as well, that filmmaking, I think Orson Welles once said, is just sort of a series of happy accidents. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. I don't think that I was ready to make it before this point. I think it needed the time. It needed the time for the research. It needed...
I think just you in terms of maturity.
Absolutely. Maturing. Also, I really believe that it was the perfect cast. I mean, I feel like no one else could have played Madhuri, no one else could have played Sonia or Rashmi. I feel very lucky to being able to get the cast that I do right now.
But I guess, both of you must have gone to quite dark places in your own mind when shooting this. It must have been quite a traumatic, quite exhausting experience, I guess, shooting this movie, because, you've got quite heavy scenes to shoot in this film.
There was a situation while we were shooting on a Sunday at the real location. It was so difficult that we had to, Tabrez had to call for a backup. It was very difficult to shoot at, Grant Road in Mumbai. The best thing was the brothels, when you walked inside the sets, it was so authentic. there was one situation where Rasul, Sunny and I, we all were shooting, and people were like literally standing around us, like, there's this scene Walking Dead, like all the people are dead and standing right next to the door, and they're like banging the door. So we were like so scared, shooting at the real locations, getting into that character, the get up, we would like just dirty our nails. It was really quite a fun experience.
Well, I did not go to a dark place in my mind, because I was like, I'm going to embrace the darkness she has. Like, I'm not going to hate it in any which way. Yeah. So I came out literally unscathed and without any trauma from this movie.
That's just always a good thing, I find.
It's amazing.
Because I've been on film sets before of comedies, and they can sometimes be almost more serious at times in a weird way to a drama, because I think there's a sort of an obligation to keep things light, because otherwise it can get a bit too much. I was wondering how you guys kept things light on this set. Did you ever sort of try and play games or pranks?
But yeah, we used to play like so many pranks. The moment Tabrez used to say cut, we all would be like, pretend that we are sneezing, or there's some, after the cut it was like a different set. Even like the crew members made sure that the moment director says cut, everybody's like quiet, pin drop silence. But the moment it's cut, and people will be like, hey, what's up, let's have lunch together, what did you get for lunch? So it was very lively and very nice and very important for for us to just get out of, like, Tabrez didn't want us to live that character, because there are so many actors, they're into method acting and stuff. So I had a gala time on sets.
Yeah, I beat her up. I mean, I had a good time.
Because I was reading that originally when you first got the screenplay for this character, you weren't initially too sure. I was wondering why that was, and what it was that initially, eventually, sort of changed your mind.
What changed my mind was meeting him and understanding that he had been working with girls for the past decade or so. So I knew that he came from a place of truth and compassion. Why I said no, and I don't think I'm wrong, even though he holds it against me, is because I saw a couple of Indian films about the subject, and they had cast real teenagers. Mrunal is 26, it becomes easier to watch her. But the other films, I thought it's such a fine line. I don't know if the director was trying to be gratuitous or if he was trying to shock you into taking action, and I didn't want to do something that I felt like the intent wasn't clear. It was just, it's very tricky. So that's why I said no, and I don't regret saying no, and I don't regret doing it. I think it's a great thing because it gave us a really nice bond. I finally agreed to do it when he was like, okay, fine, I don't care, I'll get somebody else.
Yeah, because your role it's got so much complexity and so multi-layered, which you often don't find in sort of big in supporting characters. Sometimes but that must have been such a great role for you to get your teeth into in this instance.
Yeah, I mean, I would pick that role over any other, because I love the arc that she has. I mean, any intelligent person or discerning person would see that complexity and the layers. I mean, no human being is so simple as to be able to be read so easily. Why is she so vengeful and mean in the first half? Why is she slowly softening up, opening up? And you realize what she's gone through, and it gives a great deal of humanity, I think, to her character. And I really wanted to play her in the most humanizing way, so that you understand that whatever's happening it's not all cause and effect. It's what a job like this also does to you, how you have no faith on anybody else, how you really just looking out just for yourself, for your own survival, and you don't trust other human beings too much.
I mean, Tabrez is obviously he's given over a decade of his life to this movie. Yeah. When you've got someone that has got that much enthusiasm, that much loyalty towards something, that must make it almost. I guess people would want to do even better to sort of to do justice to his project and his. I mean, what was it like working with someone that was so invested in this?
Well, I think it's one thing to have someone who's so invested in it, and another thing to have someone who's so invested but also knows what he wants and is very confident in the story that he wants to tell, and he's got the talent to pull it off. You meet a lot of filmmakers who are passionate, and passion is important, but passion alone cannot make a great movie. You have to have the know with how to bring a team together and cast the right people in it. So he was a great captain of the ship overall, and he was never one for keeping the mood depressive or too I don't know, it was never morose on set, with him. He was light about it as well. So yeah, I think it's his confidence in what he wanted, the story he wanted to tell, that made us all feel super confident.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, I mean, there's some real shocking scenes in this movie, but one of the most sort of shocking elements is just at the very end when it comes up with some of the facts and the statistics of how widespread this is around the world and how it's happening under all of our noses. How important is it that we tackle themes like this through the medium of cinema?
I mean, I think it's so important because, I mean, everyone, including me, when it came out, would bash, a movie like Taken, which, was an action movie, and, the theme of sex trafficking, a lot of things weren't realistic, but it made no difference because that movie did more for sex trafficking than any other film for one reason, because people went and saw the film. And so we have, I mean, as movie makers, as actresses, as artists, if you're able to make a movie and have it seen, I think that there's a lot of power in that. And now, sometimes it's about getting them into the movie theater. It makes no difference how you do it, but once they're in, when they walk out of this movie, hopefully they will only be thinking about one thing, and they'll be slightly more aware about the global sex trafficking situation in their backyard, regardless of whether you're in the UK or in the US.
And just very finally, Freida, I was going to ask, because I mean, you've spoken in the past about the sort of struggle sometimes to find really interesting roles for women in Hollywood. I was just wondering if you think that, I know obviously it's still quite recent, but in the sort of off the back of the Me Too and Time's Up movements, if you felt that there has been a slight change of late, and if you find that you're more privy now to better roles and screenplays than you were a few years ago.
To be really honest, I started creating my own a while back, and I don't think even at the moment there are roles for actors of ethnic minority in Hollywood. I don't think we're still given those, the weighted meaty roles yet. It's improving, but it's not there yet. I don't think, at least for South Asian, they don't know where to place them yet. It has really changed for the Black acting community, but definitely not for the South Asian community. Having said that, there is definitely a supportive movement to create your own material. So even if they have not written it, but you've written something, there's more of a supportive team that can help you push your material outside, which probably a couple of years ago wasn't possible.
Of course, you're as a huge star in India. There's never there's not as much pressure to have to make movies anywhere else, because obviously Bollywood and the Indian film industry is just so huge and sort of blossoming. But at the same time, do you have much sort of interest to say follow in the footsteps of Deepika Padukone, for example, and try making movies in other countries at all? Is that something you've given much thought to?
I have done. Well, Deepika does really mainstream commercial films. I've always taken the indie route, and I've had my films travel before. To Cannes and to did another Indo-French collaboration, did something with Meera Nair. So this wasn't new for me. The territory of this wasn't new for me, but this is pretty much what I want to do, to be able to reach out in telling rooted stories from where I come and making them be seen as far and wide as possible. For me, the real success of this film was that when it was screened in India, somebody came and donated 10 lakhs of rupees, I don't know, the
20,000 pounds,
to a charity, and I think that's a major victory for a woman to hold my hand and just cry and say, oh, it's really moved me. I that for me is more rewarding than something else, which is banal.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey